for those in this group who I haven't met, or for those watching on LinkedIn Live, my name is Michael Goldberg. I'm the executive director of our Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship and also a professor at Weatherhead. And it is great to welcome our friend and Veale Institute executive in residence, I think our first one, Sam Gerace. Sam is an outstanding entrepreneur, graduate of Weatherhead, did his executive MBA with us, and has been doing great things in Cleveland in the startup world and also mentoring other entrepreneurs. We're thrilled to have Sam as part of our Entrepreneur in Residence crew, and also for those students that are on, Ronnie, as you think about your spring schedule, Sam's actually going to be joining our faculty as an adjunct professor this spring, teaching in our SAGES seminar series. So we're thrilled about that. So I know today's topic is on customer discovery, which is something Sam's done a lot with in his career. Obviously, for those on Zoom who we can sort of see your smiling faces, or at least your names, feel free. I think we want this to be interactive as possible. So let Sam know when you have a question, and we can just have you unmute and ask a question. And if you're watching on LinkedIn Live, just put a question in the comment, and Doug and I will be monitoring, and we'll send it back in. So with that, Sam, let me turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thanks, Michael. Hello, everybody. This is titled a workshop, and I hope we can do this in workshop format. So let's do it interactively. If you do have a question, do please pop it in, and then because I'd like you to get as much benefit as possible out of this. The context I have for this, I'm, as you can tell by the amount of hair I don't have, I've been at this for a little while. So over the last 35 years, I've started, grown, and sold or taken public 4 software companies. 2 were pre-internet, so packaged software, and 2 were post-internet, so software as a service. During this time, Steve Blank took a lot of things and packaged them up into a process. He did a beautiful job of assembling things that I wish I'd had 35 years ago, because I've got the scars to bear to show you that. And I'm going to share my screen because a picture is worth at least a couple minutes of talking at this time. So let me know. Can you see that? Excellent. All right. So today's topic is customer discovery, and entrepreneurship. I think a lot of people think of entrepreneurship as having an idea for a product, producing a product, and then really doing a good job of sales and marketing that product. But in fact, study after study shows, and Steve Blank shows, that really it's about entrepreneurs who are successful, by and large, start by trying to determine sort of the art of the commercially possible, and that's really what customer discovery is about, right? I'd like to take a workshop approach. As I said, I'd like to figure out why are we talking about customer discovery? What's worth an hour of your time? What is it? And then it's a workshop. We'll try a little bit of those techniques. So we'll discuss the technique, and then we're gonna try a couple of them that I think are most beneficial, or that have proven most beneficial over the years. I mentioned Steve Blank. He wrote the first book called 4 Steps to the Epiphany. Then he learned how to name books, and he wrote a second book called The Startup Owner's Manual. The first one's a little obtuse, as is the title. The second one, The Startup Owner's Manual, is a great reference. I encourage you to look at it. And his videos. He is a professor at Stanford, and there's also Udacity course, which I have not personally used, but I hear good things about if you want some detail. But I will tell you, there's a lot of detail there, and the fact of the matter is, you should try it like everything else, as opposed to trying to get your PhD in customer discovery. So how about the why? Why bother to do this? And I want to tell you, I want to ask if $2 million is worth doing this. Because it turns out, before Steve Blank started to call it customer discovery, that in fact it was worth $2 million. Coming out of having done a couple companies, I had a hypothesis that that there was an opportunity, right? That advertising equals wasted money. And in fact, this was no secret. In 1879, John Wanamaker, who created the first department store, which any of you are Philadelphians, that's where it was, is attributed, not clear, but is attributed to having said, I know that half of the money I spend on advertising is wasted. I just don't know which half. And that stems from a lot of things, right? There's no feedback loop in print or television or radio advertising. And when you can get feedback, even through things like couponing, it's long. It takes quite a bit of time. So my hypothesis was that the juxtaposition of wasted value and technology, and so what I also knew is, hey, we could eliminate 50% waste if we did real-time tracking of ads. We did sales measurement to say, did they actually result in sales? And then we could add some automatic optimization, not with machine learning. At the time, it wasn't where it is today, but we could. So that's what we knew. And I want to underscore what we knew, right? I knew this. And so we went in and started to, frankly, we did something that you will learn we shouldn't have done, which is we built an underlying system, right? It wasn't, it was not incredibly full featured, but it got the job done on this advertising system. And we went out and started to sell it, and we met with a lot of customers. And here's what we heard. Oh, this would be helpful if it also had X. And then you go to the next customer. Oh, this would be nice if it also had. And we had a lot of very lukewarm responses, as well as a lot of smiles and encouragement, because people like to be liked, and they like to like you, most people. So we could have very unfortunately proceeded ahead with this, but thankfully, I started to sense real fear in the room of something else. That is to say, in the quiet spaces between our presentation, when we were chatting with people in breaks and other things, I started to detect real fear. And moreover, a problem that was bad enough that they had already tried to solve it themselves. And we were targeting retailers. So this is Barnes & Noble and IBM when they had a PC division, and The Gap. These are not, well, IBM is. But Barnes & Noble and The Gap and others are not technically forward companies, and IBM wasn't consumer tech forward in terms of being able to track ads. And yet they had tried to cobble together a solution somehow, even though they weren't really expert in it. And a particular day, when we got sort of around to the end of this, Barnes & Noble let me know that they had done a detailed analysis, right? This is worth $2 million to them if they could figure it out. And that's what they, and this was a casual conversation. So that's what we discovered. And what we did in that moment, when I heard them say, we'd love to spend $2 million on this, we just can't figure out how, is I spent the rest of the day completely ignoring the solution we had come to present and asked a bunch of open-ended questions. Like, what do you mean? What's the real problem here, right? And we drilled down on the core problem, which is everybody thought that location on the internet meant you had a website, but Amazon had started something called affiliate sales. They were selling their product on several 100,000 websites, so people didn't have to go find them. And so I listened hard, and then we restated the problem as a value proposition, or a set of value propositions, to make sure I understood. And by the way, that's a technique I learned as a scientist. My degree's in biochemistry. And so I asked if we could come back to a potential solution for this, because I'd realized that much of the technology we were doing for ad tracking would do what they wanted, which is take 1 million different products and display them on several million websites and allow the transaction processing as opposed to ad processing. So two things benefited us because we didn't have the customer discovery handbook, if you will. One was genuine curiosity, right? And I encourage you to go into any customer with genuine curiosity. And the second is customer focus. I was curious about them and about their business and what was keeping them up at night. And those were incredibly beneficial to me. And so we went back and we, in fact, came back with a very low fidelity solution, a presentation, a PowerPoint that said, here's what we can do and we can deliver it. And we got a $2 million contract before we had offered the solution. No, before we had a solution, right? They said, if you can do this in so many months, then you can, then we'll do it. And they signed a contract. So the point here is that entrepreneurial opportunities are not about what you know, but it's about understanding what the customer knows and going through a process of discovery to find the art of the commercially possible. Now, I do want to talk about commercially possible because if you are exceptional at a particular thing, coding or creating automobiles or any particular thing, and you want to do that, fantastic. If you just want to have ideas about that thing and do it, then you're an artist or an artisan, and you can go do that. But don't think that you're going to build an exceptional business around it, right? If you want to build an exceptional business, you have to discover customers. And that's what this process is about. And I say that because we knew a lot of things and we had gone so far as to build software only to discover real opportunity. And thankfully, we've used that process since. Commercially possible, right, is something I want to talk about, right? Are people willing to pay for the product? It does not mean we like that, right? Whether that's your mother, your uncle, or a customer who likes everybody to feel good. It doesn't mean, oh, we would probably use that. And it doesn't mean we agree with your value hypothesis, right? It means we would pay for it. And I want to underscore something. We had a $4 billion a year company pay us before we had a product. That's how much they wanted it. And that is an essential part of customer discovery. So we can talk more about it, but don't confuse art with commercial possibility, and don't confuse the knowledge in your head with knowledge of what the world really needs. The best advice I can give you at this point is to get out. I don't mean the webinar, but I mean, and what Steve Blank says, get out of the building. There's no valuable knowledge inside the building. You, your confidants, the team you have built, your advisors, your professors, your employees, whoever. That's great. You have to get out. And if you're the founder, you especially have to get out. Or if you're part of that founding core team, you especially have to get out. It can't be delegated. And frankly, I could stop here and say customer discovery is about getting out of the building and talking to customers, and we'd probably be done with a workshop. But it would be inefficient for you. And so I think we'll give you the benefit of Steve Blank's expertise and a bunch of other people's expertise that he has assembled as we do this. So technically what we're talking about is finding product market fit. And you'll hear that phrase a lot. It's become very popular, right? And what it means is, right, that your product hits a need in the market. Do not confuse that with having created a product in a vacuum and then going out and finding the market for it. Right? Because you might be the only one who wants a, double-sided blue iPad, right? I don't need a screen on both sides, and I don't want mine to be, well, it's case, it should be blue, green. I don't need it to be green. Anyway, but look, here's the process of customer discovery, right? Create a problem hypothesis. Test a hypothesis. Then test a solution. Right? And then validate the potential, then start putting real effort and dollars behind it. And I want to highlight one thing: create a problem hypothesis. Because most of what people do is create a solution hypothesis. They say, I think the world wants a double-sided green iPad. Well, that's not what customer discovery is about. Customer discovery is saying, I think I know what the world has a problem with. And our problem hypothesis was, we think that there's inefficiency in advertising, right? That by eliminating 50% waste in advertising, this represents a big opportunity. That was our problem hypothesis. We should have done a couple slides around that and then gone out and questioned a lot of people. And that really is the process of customer discovery. So, by the way, don't think that your expertise is wasted. I'm not suggesting that the fact that you can span a couple disciplines, knowledge of the world, knowledge of your subject matter expertise, like software or robotics or paper or any of the other industries, right? Steel, who knows? That's actually valuable. But in fact, the place it's valuable is in crafting the hypothesis. That's where your expertise comes in. It's really good, right, for figuring out what the question to ask is. After that, you shouldn't rely on it. And again, if you're anxious to really create something specific, I encourage you to go be an artist. Right? Now let's talk about making the hypothesis specific, because you heard our casual hypothesis, which was eliminating 50% waste in advertising represents a big opportunity. That was not a business hypothesis. That was a task or a product hypothesis, right? It wasn't a solution, but it was, look, we can. We are, the other thing that customer discovery is about is thinking about a business. And understand, the first time I did this, I had a science degree and I didn't know a darn thing about business. I got my business education on the street. You don't have to know a lot about business, but you have to think about what it means from a business standpoint. And so you'll craft a business hypothesis, you'll make the hypothesis specific, and then you're going to test it. And that's really step one of customer discovery, right? The test, by the way, is, will people pay for something that is related to your problem hypothesis? That's the test. So how do we go about doing that? Well, I said you don't have to know a lot about business, and there's another fella Alex Ostenwalder, who really looked at what Steve Blank was doing and created this very valuable tool. And it's perhaps the one that will give you the most value over time if you use it. And it's not complex. It is not difficult. It's intensely, it lends itself to intense collaboration, and it doesn't require a great deal of expertise. It basically takes the idea of a hypothesis and breaks it down into 9 areas. And you can see those here. It's a great tool for making a specific business hypothesis and refining that problem hypothesis, right? Now today, right, I want to highlight the highest value pieces here and work on those. We can talk about the others, but when you start, these are the ones you need to focus on. And in particular, by the way, this one is the one that we need to focus on, right? The value propositions. So that is in your first iteration of the business model canvas, in your first iteration here. Why do you think, right, Ronnie, Ann, why do you think your idea is valuable, right? Rebecca, Ronald, why? Use your intuition and state the value proposition. Now, by the way, you might have an idea about customer segments, people who might buy this. You might have some ideas about partners, and you might have an idea about revenue streams. But you should fill this in. Okay. Now, I do want to move to a workshop, because I want you to get used to doing 2 things: feeling comfortable asking questions and using the business model canvas. So let me, let's go to I've covered up. Thank you. New share. Where is my, there it is. Okay. All right. So let's talk about what a completed business model canvas might look like, or at least some form of business model canvas. Can you all see that? So I hope you're familiar with Spotify. The business model canvas for Spotify, and this is a sparse one, right? The one that people might have originally filled out, it goes like this. Look, music listeners probably want unlimited music that's legal. That's a value proposition. And note that we expressed that in the form of the customer. People might appreciate something that's less expensive than individual song purchases. And they might appreciate automatic personalization. They might like it to be subscription-based, and they might like collaborative social playlists. Those are those are 5 value propositions. Now, can I just ask a quick question? Which, any of those not phrased in a way that's customer focused? Any thoughts? Nobody? I mean, I don't want collaborative social playlists. I don't know what collaborative social playlists are. I like to share music with my friends, right? I like mixtapes, right? In fact, I'm old enough that literally, right, I traded mixtapes, right? In middle and high school, literally cassette tapes. And mostly I wasn't the one making them. But it was really helpful. So one important thing to do is to make sure that you're thinking from a customer perspective, and it helps to phrase this in a customer perspective, which is, for example, sharing music with friends. And you might say compilations too, right? Sharing music compilations with friends. Okay. I will tell you that if you have knowledge and expertise in the industry, you probably might have some other value propositions beyond your audience. Like music sellers, prior to Spotify, didn't have a lot of user analytics other than what was selling, you know, at record shops, and they didn't necessarily have access to the audience except through intermediaries. And so these are value propositions to music sellers, who are, by the way, an important partner. And when you initially fill this out, I would not be surprised if your assumption was that your customer's segment is all music listeners. And by the way, yeah, we're going to charge subscription fees and we're going to use advertising revenue. This is a great initial business hypothesis that you should now go and interview people with. Go do it. Take this in this form, or put this into a cheat sheet for yourself. You could do this verbally. You can do it in terms of a PowerPoint if you want to. You can give it to people as a questionnaire if you really want to do that, and go refine it. Now let's try the process of actually doing this. And I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, because what you have to do, right, when you do this is refine your hypothesis by asking questions. So here's the Never Hungry snack delivery service, right? And by the way, you're all on the founding team. In fact, this was your hypothesis, right? People want snacks that are always available. It's inconvenient to go make small purchases, and when I'm hungry, I'm hungry. I need snacks when stores are closed. All right, we can easily create a system that that lets you get a regular delivery of your favorite snacks. It'll save time and effort, and you won't be hungry. So this is the business model canvas, right? And by the way, we need partners with snack sellers, snack manufacturers, in effect, and we have our market is all snack eaters, right? That's what we're busy doing. So here's what I'd like to do. I'd like you to each take 60 seconds and think of 2 questions individually, right, that you would ask if this was your business model canvas and you were going to do a person on the street interview to figure out if anybody cared. Right? And then I'd like to open up for 5 minutes and ask people to volunteer to ask their question, right? And I'd like somebody else to volunteer to answer it, by the way. Or maybe I'll tell you what, put the question in the chat, then we'll ask the question and somebody can volunteer to answer it as a snack eater. So 60 seconds, think of a couple questions you would use to refine this hypothesis, to figure out if people care, to figure out if it's true, to really try and figure out value. And if you're not a snack eater, I'd like you to get out of the Zoom immediately because you're making the rest of us feel really bad. All right, on the Zoom chat, I'm seeing those snack questions come in. That's excellent. So now take another 10 seconds if you've got a particularly important question. Toss a few into the chat there, and excellent. Now, I want to observe one thing in the chat, which is everything related to snacks. I don't believe there's a single question there we go. But thanks, Bob. Bob Sopko said what prices, but every other question prior to that had the word snack in it. I want to remind you that the opportunity that we had, that I mentioned to you for the $2 million contract, was all about advertising. And if every question I had advertising in it, we wouldn't have uncovered that opportunity. And so another question, right? Thinking generally about things like what happens when you're hungry, how often are you hungry, are incredibly valuable to help you get out of your own head. So let's take Ronald Immerman. Ronald, you asked the question, when you want a snack, how do you buy it? Does anybody want to act like a customer? You're the person on the street we're interviewing, and answer that question.
If I don't have any in the house, then I go to the convenience store.
Okay. So that's really interesting, right? You go to the convenience store. Now, I could record that in my notes, but it's always helpful to ask another question. And when you go to what do you mean you go to the convenience store? What does that actually entail for you?
Leaving the house,
and
for one thing.
And how do you get there?
Usually by car.
Okay, so all right, so you're going to leave the house. You're going to take a car, and you know, in your regular habits, how long does that take you?
10 or 15 minutes.
Okay, good. So now, did you all? Anne had three. Thanks, Anne. Anne had 3 ready answers. First of all, I want to point out, because many first-time entrepreneurs are really good subject matter experts, but they don't. They're not necessarily good at asking questions of strangers. Not that Anne is strange, but you have to. You know, Anne did not bite, and I don't bear any scars from having asked Anne a few questions, right? Especially if you do a person on the street interview, you can just run away if you need to. But here's the point. Asking questions is the basis of getting information. And I asked several follow-up questions, and at no point did Anne sigh, frown, and say, I have to spend 10 minutes in the car. Okay. I didn't enter another value proposition here because I didn't hear Anne tell me about a pain. She was not that pained so far with the fact that when she wanted a snack, she went to the convenience store. So I might begin to follow up with, how often does that happen? Because Anne might be a perfect planner. In other words, she does that 3 times a year when she runs out of snacks, but otherwise she's a good shopper. She's much more organized than I am. So Bob Sopko asks, how often do you snack? Who wants to answer that? Who wants to be a consumer and ask a potential customer person on the street and answer that question? And Bob, unmute, because you can follow up on this one instead of me. Anybody want to answer that? How often do you snack? Come on, let's not be embarrassed. Nobody?
Well, that's
Times a day.
What's that?
afternoon at 3. A lot of people do because that's when they run into a wall. But again, you have to ask them, and will they answer you truthfully? Because again, like you said, you don't have to be embarrassed, and somebody may be embarrassed, and I don't know you from anyone, so I'm not going to tell you.
And maybe there's a difference between now that we're all working from home, how often we snack versus the ability to snack at work.
Right. And is a snack a candy bar and an apple is not a snack?
That's so. I don't know what you all were thinking when I said snacks, but that's a critical question, right? And one value proposition, you follow up that question. If I'm doing a personal street interview, I'd say, Nikki, what's a snack to you? When I say snack, what does it mean to you? What do you eat when you're hungry between meals? You're going to tell us, Nikki, or can you,
Sure. I mean, that varies. It could be an apple with cinnamon. It's probably some type of fruit.
Okay, great. So if I ask that question of 10 people and I got a series of answers, right, that spanned a number of things, right? One value proposition might be what Nikki just said, the availability of fruit, right? Another value proposition after I've done 20 of these might be the ability to make choices in the moment, because people don't snack with the same thing all the time. Here's the key thing. We're evolutionarily incented to conserve energy, to want to make good impressions. And a lot of things can, and by the way, we're culturally incented in the United States to always do things well. And so I think this takes most entrepreneurs out of the realm of starting by asking questions first. And remember, the situation I talked about, we didn't ask questions first, right? I'm just very lucky that we asked them before we went whole hog into trying to take that product to market. So this is a tool tailor-made for people who aren't used to asking business questions, and giving you a grid to ask questions around something and then go a little bit deeper. So let's go back to to the framework and say, how often do I do that, right? Because ideally what I do is I do a business model canvas, and then I go out and do 20 interviews. And at the end of that day, I do the canvas again, right? Or we, the team, does the canvas again to line up with what we learned. And then the next day we go 20 interviews and I revise the canvas and I do it again. Now, lest you think that this feels daunting, I mentor in a high school entrepreneurial studies program. Most of the people who take the course are high school juniors. They don't know anything about business. They don't have any subject matter expertise except about social media. And as part of the course, in the first week after they formulate their business model canvas, and there's some prep work. They do a mock consulting engagement for a business to pick up some business. They do an actual consulting engagement for a business that knows their level of expertise to learn some business terminology. But their first entrepreneurial excursion, their first introduction to business model canvas and customer discovery is in week number 1, they have to do 100 interviews, period. Now, if high school juniors can do it, you can do it too, right? In 1 week, you can get 100 interviews. You can have gone through 5 canvases, and I promise you the discovery you will have evident in front of you will be substantial. And it's good practice to keep the canvases, keep the iterations, because your learning over time will be important to you, providing context. So the best, if we stopped here, I would have given you probably the best tool from customer discovery, which is iterating on the business model canvas.
Hey, Sam.
Yes.
Bob, question. 100 in a week?
Yeah.
These are really short interviews.
Really good point, Bob.
Because like through NSFI Core,
yeah,
they want them to do 20 over 8 weeks.
Yeah. So let's differentiate a couple things. And if it's a business to consumer proposition, the interviews can be short. Chances are you're not crafting an immensely complex airplane. If it's a business to business conversation, then you might dial down the number of interviews, right? And the reason is because the interviews will be longer. They'll take a little longer to set up. But in all candor, I have very few people who are unwilling to get together if I say, hey, we're exploring an opportunity that could have real value for your business. Is it worth 30 minutes and coffee? Right? And they'll have coffee with you and you can do the interview. And by the way, as Bob points out also, the interviews may get longer over time. Okay. Even over the course of the first, say, 30 to 100, depending on whether it's B2B or B2C. But there is no reason for you to go deep on your ideas, right, in the first few interviews. What you want to do is go shallow on your ideas, listen hard, iterate on the canvas, spend more time listening and iterating on the canvas. And the more information you get to lead your questions from consumers or customers, potential, then the more complex or sophisticated the interviews can get. Bob is probably at the most sophisticated end. If you are a scientist, a principal investigator, don't have any business knowledge and are charged with or interested in commercializing your technology, I-Core is a Steve Blank designed program for a U.S. government sponsored program for commercializing research. And so it's on the exact opposite end of B2C. It is the most complex stuff for which there's not necessarily an obvious commercial use. And those interviews, as Bob said, are the longest, take the longest to set up. There's a great deal of explanation. So look, there is some allowance for the nature of your idea, right? Once things start to solidify, right, the frequency goes down. I mean, the frequency, can come down a little bit because the interviews will get longer. And maybe, you're only doing, 50 a week or 20 a week or whatever. If they're incredibly complex, 5 a week. And you're iterating on your canvas less because less and less is changing. And when your canvas gets to the point that it's not changing, by the way, that's a good sign. But it's only a good sign if you, as a result, find what Steve Blank calls earlyvanegelists. By the way, if the old marketing adage holds true, things should never be longer than 3 syllables. Again, his naming could use a little work. But these are people, right, who are at the top of the pyramid, right? Everybody in your market has a problem. Only some of them are aware of the problem. Only some of those who've been looking for a solution. Only some have tried, of those, a small number have tried to cobble together a solution. And an even smaller number has said, look, there's got to be something out there. We've got to figure out what the budget is. It's such a problem. We don't even know what to buy, but we know how much it's worth to us. And I want to point out in particular the top of this pyramid, right? One of the things Steve Blank says, not in the book, as I recall, but in one of his videos, is one of the best indications of that you are ready to move to a potential solution is that you have found a group of people who have tried to cobble together a solution. That's a huge indicator, a huge indicator. In fact, for me, it's been a better indicator over the years than has acquired a budget, because has acquired a budget has some corporate externalities that aren't true. A department might go try and cobble together a solution. They might not try and assemble a budget. So here's the point. An early evangelist, like I mentioned to you, Barnes & Noble, was willing to pay $2 million for unpolished functionality, or in our case, for functionality that didn't exist except on a PowerPoint. And we went around and found a few other customers in exactly the same situation. And that said to us, oh gosh, this is worth doing. You're ready. You have validated your problem hypothesis when people are willing to pay for what you have before you have it. One thing to do, by the way, after you think you're totally ready, as I just said, is to pay attention to your customer segments, because recall that in our initial business model canvas, we said all snack eaters. That's probably not true, right? Because I'm really not prepared at the moment to go to Asia with my snack service. So that would rule out, 4 billion people or 5. So here are the things to think about. Another useful tool, the total available market. And we understand, man, that's fantastic. There are a lot of people out there. Then there's your served addressable market. For your problem, right? And for a potential solution to that problem, what part of the market does that represent? And then within that, and this is better called target market. Some people call it served attainable market, which is confusing as heck, right? But your target market, of all the people who you might be able to address, who are you specifically targeting? And in the case of snacking, right, we know there's 7 billion snackers worldwide. I'm not prepared to go outside the U.S. right now, just for 2 reasons. Snacks are different elsewhere, and translation. And then I should pick a small target market, because I suspect that serving someone a snack in rural Oklahoma is different than serving someone a snack in downtown Cleveland. And so I might, in my interviews, have realized that the 19 million undergraduates are a pretty good target market. And the reason I present this tool, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but the point is to get your head out of the idea that you're going to hit the 7 million snackers in the world all at once. This is a great sort of grounding in who we're going to talk to initially. Use that on that rightmost column of the business model canvas. So I've got people who are willing to pay for it, and I've narrowed I've categorized them accurately, right? Undergraduates in the United States. That's who I'm targeting. Now I'm ready to test a solution. And these undergraduates who've been pulling out their hard-earned cash and saying, please, I know you don't have a solution, but I want to pay for an advanced subscription now, right? Now it's time to test a solution, right? What does that mean? Very frequent term here. Minimum viable product, right? That's out there. The goal of minimum means what we don't have to build. You can imagine 1,000 things that your snack delivery service is going to have. I don't want to build a single one of those that it doesn't have to have in order to sell it. Then we can add all that great stuff. Okay, custom packaging. But if you're a designer, you got bows on each package. We're going to bag it up, or we're going to write nice messages, or we're going to personalize the snack service in some way. And viable, maybe the most important thing is that for your thinking, people can't use this unless, right? And people won't use it unless. So when we talk about a minimum viable product or an MVP, there are a couple phases to pay attention to. One is a low fidelity prototype. And then one is a high fidelity prototype. And we're gonna go through this process, right? A low fidelity prototype might be just illustrations of the software. That's what we used with Barnes & Noble, right? Here's what it would look like. We came back a week after the session I mentioned to you, and I said, okay, here's the thing. Here's what it will do, and here's what it would look like. And we had screen mock-ups. That's all we had. That's a low fidelity prototype. And we took those around to other people as well to validate that they too thought that this was really necessary and would pay us. Technology's reached a point where you might be able to also do an early access website that has some of those mock-ups and says, put me on your mailing list, right? And that's a good indication. So you can do low fidelity prototypes that you have to take around. You can do low fidelity prototypes on the web. And a high fidelity prototype could be a clickable prototype. There are great tools available for like Framer or Axiom that allow you to create beautiful clickable prototypes that look like functioning apps, including the ability to enter information and they sort things in real time. Or you might be able to do some working code pretty simply. That's if you're doing software. If you have a physical product or if you have a service, right? Almost always it's necessary for your low fidelity prototype just to be a high fidelity presentation, right? But then as that evolves, you could do a mock-up or a model, or in the case of a service, a concierge implementation. And I do want to underscore this last bit if you're doing a service. Too many people try and create the service instead of, in essence, faking the service. And this is the Wizard of Oz moment, right? There was a company that wanted to test whether people wanted to be presented with a recipe and where to get the food for that recipe near them. Typically, that food was also at a discount. So it was a great thing to buy. It was inexpensive, and it was right near them. And so it was very personalized, and it involved cooking. And they could have done all the technology necessary to collect all that information, but they did what they call the concierge app, implementation. They had 4 people on the team. They signed up 200 test customers, and they did it all manually, right? Every day they went through what people liked. They had shoppers, and they all from the same neighborhood. They had shoppers go around to the stores and figure out what was on sale. They came back, they composed emails, they sent them out. There was no technology whatsoever except them emailing some things. And it validated those aspects that people were willing to pay for. So the goal here is don't spend a dollar on anything until it has been validated that people have to have it in order to buy the solution. And here's my second tool that I'd like to introduce you to, right? Because you're tempted, if you're thinking about products, to go to product development methodology. And what product development methodologies are designed to do is ideate on a lot of new features and then help you flesh them out and figure out the markets for each feature and set a whole timing for all the features. If you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to launch a product, there's only one set of customers you're aiming at, and all you want to do are the minimum viable features for them. And so there's a different tool called user story mapping. This asks about user experiences and user jobs. And it looks like this, right? You've got the goals, you've got tasks, and then you have the stories, which are a day in the life. So let's go here and take a look at a user story, right, about making pizza. Something you've all done, right? And one activity, the initial task is make the dough. And that's our goal. The task is prep the base, one of them, and then proof the dough. And now I start to ask users about their story. Well, what do you mean prep the base? And I start to add the details of the story. Well, I gather the utensils, which, by the way, you might skip over. I measure flour, I measure water, I mix. Right? Then I have to proof the dough. That's a task. And I put it in an oil bowl. I wait for the first rise. I punch it down. I wait for the second rise. I roll out the dough. Wait a minute, I learned that some people roll out the dough, other people stretch it. Basically, that's not a real requirement, okay? I want to come back to that. right? But you're going to get some in there that are, yeah, maybe they don't apply to everybody. What's the next activity, by the way, any of you pizza makers out there after you make the dough? Anybody?
Put the sauce on.
All right. So our goal is to add the sauce. In order to do that, Doug, do we first have to prep the sauce?
Yes, we do.
So we're going to prep the sauce. That's task 1, right? Task 2 is maybe spread it on, right? What's the first action in terms of prepping the sauce?
Well, you've got to boil the tomatoes so that you get the skin off.
Whoops. Let me just go here.
We have an Italian plant in this seminar, Sam.
Yeah, there you go. That's right.
Pizza.
Which is a good thing, right? So we got to boil the tomatoes. What was the second thing, Doug?
You got to get rid of all the pulp and seeds.
Excellent, right? So we can make this entire story, and I'm not putting myself in there. I'm asking Doug, what's the next thing? What's the next thing, right? And then I might ask him how he spread the sauce. That seems obvious, but man, I got a lesson in the, you don't just slap the sauce on there, whatever, right? You take, and not from Doug, but I'm saying my last name correctly, Gerace, right? It's Italian. So there you go. I can tell you about spreading sauce very carefully. So here's the point. This is the user story, and these are the things that your product, if it's going to make pizza making better or faster or cheaper or easier, has to support. And if not everybody does it, there's a term that's emerged called the backlog. Oh, roll out the dough. Well, we eventually need to do that for some people in order to use it, but not everybody needs it. So I'm putting that down here in the backlog. It means that we recognize that's something nice, but everything up here has got to be absolutely essential for every customer for the early evangelists. And clearly, if we don't mix the dough, and if we don't do all these things, we don't get dough. We don't get good dough here. It'll be horrible if we don't let it rise. And if we don't have tomatoes and remove the pulp, we've got terrible sauce. So what the user story tool does, and both of these tools I'm using are templates in a collaborative, in effect, a versatile whiteboard called Miro. But these tools exist on specialty sites, and you can just do them on paper as most of us do. The user story technique helps you get out of your own head when you're out of the office and make sure that what you're focused on is the story for the user. Once you have these stories, then you can easily decide, you can easily see those things that your minimum viable product or your hypothesis has to do, right? It absolutely has to do. And then you can articulate that that hypothesis. And I mean articulate, low fidelity prototype, right? Pictures of our, pizza making machine, which by the way, ThinkBox has at Case, right? The pizza making robotic machine. But I want to point out again that the bar here to know that what you're doing is worth doing is commercially possible is that you have to think about this this unequivocal love on one side, don't see a need on the other, and you go through your business model canvas. You're going to present a low fidelity prototype, you do a new iteration of canvas, another low fidelity prototype, and a new iteration of canvas until, right, you get unequivocal love. Meaning we're going to pay for that thing right now. So that we want to put some money down so you can develop it. These other categories don't matter. They may make you feel good. They may make you feel like there are individuals out there who believe what you believe, but it doesn't matter whether people like it, because they'll say they like it, but then they'll tell you what they really need. If they understand it after a long explanation, that really means they weren't even thinking there first. And if they don't see a need, well, that's sort of self-explanatory. This sort of lukewarm response means you need to iterate again. You've not found enough customers, right, to launch this. And that's when you do what's called a pivot. And this is the most misunderstood, misused term in perhaps all of entrepreneurship. Pivot does not mean that I proposed that I was doing a snack delivery service, and now I'm going to try and do, an automated lawn mowing service. Right? What pivot means is you make a material change to one of those 9 categories on the business model canvas. That's all it is, right? Because you didn't get this far without understanding that there's value out there, but you haven't quite honed in to the point where people are ready to do it. Like somebody asked about how do you, subscriptions. Really, I'm going to pay subscriptions for my snack? Maybe I want an easy button. Just give me a button on my desk, right? Whenever I hit it, the snack gets there, right? I don't want to subscribe, in effect, and have it automatically bill my credit card. Well, that would be a change, right, to a product feature, right? Maybe it's a change to the revenue model, as we just said, from subscription to direct pay. So you make a change and you go back through. And that's what we've done so far, and we're almost at time, is create a problem hypothesis. Test that hypothesis by getting out of the building and just asking questions. Once we found people who were ready to pay for it, then we articulated a solution using user stories to determine that solution, and then articulated it. And then we validate the solution potential, right? And this is where you might begin to do the stuff that you probably think you should start with, which is, let's really detail the target market. Let's really make sure we can reach the people. Can I reach college undergraduates? Is that a feasible thing to do, right? That's much more feasible than saying, I'm going to reach everybody who happens to have a given book on the shelf. I don't know if I don't know how I would figure out if Doug had that book on his shelf or not, right? But so can we reach the people we're talking about? Can we make money? This is where you're going to do some analysis after you've done all this work to make sure the analysis is worthwhile, and that will bring you to the end of the art of the commercially possible. You'll then have the confidence to go into what's called customer development, which is, right, make the product and go sell it. So that's customer discovery. Right? Create a problem hypothesis, test the hypothesis, test the solution, then do some analysis and validate that everything you're articulating is feasible in the world. And I promise you, if you go through this, you will have a far better likelihood of entrepreneurial success than if you don't.
Get out. Is that get out of the building or get out of our Zoom session?
There you go.
Sam, I want to thank you. We are at the hour point. That was a rich session. I'm very hungry because we talked about all these snacks and pizzas and all these things we should be doing. I think using a tool like the business model canvas and other variations of it, which are things that I know Bob Sopko's on, that Bob and Victoria and others, Victoria Avi at CWR, you launch network with students, and it's great to have a mix of folks here. And for those that are watching on LinkedIn Live, we really appreciate you doing this. Unfortunately, I do, in the world of Zoom, I have to hop to my next Zoom. But I know Sam's always accessible to students and alums and pretty easy to find. So I'm sure as you put your own business ideas through the paces, I'm sure he'd be willing to be a resource, hopefully.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the other, I saw that Michael put Steve Blank in the chat. I just put a link to that Miro board that I used, so you can view that. You can copy it for yourself. Those templates are there, and they're beautifully functional if you want to use those. And I'm here as a resource. There's no greater fan of entrepreneurs than I am. So I'm delighted to help.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Sam, and thanks everybody for joining today, and we will see you soon.